Welcome to the cityCURRENT radio show. I'm Andrew Bartolotta, Director of Digital Media here at cityCURRENT. And today we're covering a tender yet transparent topic on our final days with experienced hospice nurse Beth Cavenaugh, as she reveals what options you may have as a patient with a terminal diagnosis. Beth, thank you for finding us support to understand this process, be better informed, and anticipate the unknown.
Thanks for having me on your show, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
Give us some experience, your experience working in palliative care, and what kind of philosophy and personality it takes to be a compassionate hospice nurse.
I've been a nurse for about 25 years, and I've been in hospice for about the last 15 years. And I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. And palliative care, palliative to palliate means to manage symptoms. So you palliate somebody so they feel better, basically. And but hospice care is end of life care. So it's the last 6 months generally of a person's life. And I kind of fell into it. I mean, there were a lot of roads that led to me becoming a hospice nurse. I lost my mom when I was 28 years old, and I took care of her for the last 3 months of her life. And it was a profound experience for me and something I never regret. I'm so happy I did it. And I think that experience, I can be much more empathic to people who are losing somebody because I've lost my own mom. And I know how this experience goes. I know how scary and frightening it can be, and all the unknowns that come with it. And yeah, so when I did finally get into hospice after a decade of being a nurse, I just felt like it was a really amazing place for me to land, and it feels very right. I don't know if it will be my lifelong thing, but it definitely feels like the right place for me now. And as far as what type of personality does it take to be a hospice nurse, and what kind of philosophy of care? I mean, I think everybody has their own care philosophies. It's really important to me to be as transparent as I can to patients who are dying, because I think the softer and gentler but candid, I think having a candid approach but being gentle about it is really important, because the topic is tough and you're at the end of your life. And but I want to be transparent so that they have the freedom to ask questions or talk about their fears or concerns that maybe they don't want to talk to their family about. So, I mean, I think transparency is really important, and compassion is also really important. I've been doing a lot of research on compassion lately, and it's almost like looking back over the last 15 years, I realized why I was doing a lot of the things I was doing, which was all this self-care stuff. Like I was trying meditation practices, and I would go on retreats, and I would take walks in nature, and I, would pray. And so all these things that were trying to keep me centered in the midst of so much suffering. And that is really what compassion is. Empathy is to feel what another person's feeling. But if you have empathy that's not layered with compassion, which compassion is like this strength that comes from knowing that people suffer and knowing that that's part of our life, everybody's life. And so I think kind of it's this delicate dance always of, feeling the suffering for somebody, but also knowing that this is their burden to bear. So it's a weird dance. I don't know how every hospice nurse feels. I also think that hospice nurses are in general a pretty fun bunch, because they really they appreciate life. And we know that our time could be up at any time. So I know a lot of hospice nurses like to travel, and they like to have a good time. So it's a really I love working with hospice nurses because they are very grounded in the reality that death is part of our story.
Now, for those caring for aging parents and loved ones, what are some tips or advice that you'd give to help them through this season of caregiving and being their advocate?
It's often frustrating for people who are taking care of a loved one who's older because the loved one is making choices that may not align with what you think is the right thing for your loved one to do. A lot of patients I would have family conferences in the hospital and I talk about hospice and I tell them what it's all about. And to me, it made really good sense that this person should sign up for hospice. But this person wasn't ready. This person did not want to have a nurse come into their home, or this person did not feel like they were done trialing treatments. So um, one of the most important things I think is patient autonomy, where you offer the patient all the information to make an informed decision about their care, and then you let them make their decision. And it may not align with yours, but the most important thing is, you know, the value of this person's independence. And sometimes it takes a while for people to get on board with something like hospice or palliative care or, quitting smoking or whatever. Sometimes they'll say no to it forever. So I think patient autonomy is really important. And I think just showing up for them is really the most important thing too, because at this stage, a lot of people veer away from death and dying and they don't want to talk about it and they're afraid. But I think by showing up for that you don't have to ask all the questions or have really intense conversations about it. But I think you being there, it's like the quality of time versus quantity of time. Sometimes I think more quantity of time is better because things just naturally will come up
Mhm.
then.
You have this experience and you wrote a book called Some Light at the End, an end of life guidebook for patients and their caregivers. Talk about the book, what people can learn from it, and maybe some tips that are inside the book.
I wrote this book to patients who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. So it's actually written to a patient. And I really wanted them to have just transparent information about what it looks like to die, how to assemble their care team, how to choose a hospice. If they decide not to have hospice, what some other options are. Maybe they need to boost their caregiving situation. Maybe they need to think about having family check in on them more. Um, I had this one page, so I wrote it primarily for patients, but I also thought of the caregiver every step of the way, because the reality is that family members are going to be taking care of the patient. And most people who take care of these hospice patients aren't medical professionals. And even when you are, it's very complex and complicated because there's family dynamics involved. But I think that I just wanted to offer practical information about the end of life. It includes things like, pain management, why we choose pain medications that we do. It actually lists medications that are used for pain management because, when you're not a medical professional, all the medications sound like oxymorphic codal blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
like it all sounds the same.
Yeah.
And it's so confusing. And there's two medication names for each medication, which just totally makes things confusing. So, I have things about pain management, anxiety management, delirium, confusion, shortness of breath, common symptoms that patients at the end of life experience. And the caregiver, the family member is often the one trying to manage this. And so the family member will often call up the hospice and say, hey, what do I do? Grandpa's having some shortness of breath. And we'll say, this is what we recommend. We'll send a nurse out to come visit you. But I wanted them to have a reference book that they could look at 3 a.m, and it's a really bite-sized approach to hospice care. I gave them kind of just enough information that they need while they're managing someone's care so they could understand where we're coming from and why we make the decisions that we do, and to have more courage and and empowerment, to take care of somebody who's dying. I had one of my, in the first year of hospice nursing, I had two patients that were side by side in a room. So this is before we changed it around and had one person per room. And there was a curtain splitting, between the two beds. So these two patients are dying. The one near the window is like actively dying. So she has hours left. The other one is doing pretty well. Families coming in and out, the chaplain's coming in and out, giving last rites to the patient by the window. We're running in and out, like giving pain medications. The person next to the door asked me, she said, "Beth, is my roommate dying?" And I said, "Yeah, she is. We're just going to try to keep her really comfortable. She is right now. Her family's there." She said, "Oh, is that how it's going to go?" And I said, "Probably. I mean, our whole goal is to make people feel comfortable and to make sure the family's there and to give them whatever they need, whether it be a religious rite or the rabbi to come in and give a blessing or whatever is important to the patient so that they can exit this world, as gracefully as possible." And she was just kind of like, "Oh, I didn't know that's how people die." So her roommate died that day, and the next day I came in, and my patient by the door, she wasn't actively dying, but she was now non-responsive. And and then the next day she died. And I felt like being able to provide her with that information was really important for her because she had so much fear and concern about how she was going to die. And I just think that kind of softened the whole process, knowing she was going to be comfortable, knowing we would, be there for her, get the family there. So I always remember that story, and that was like 15 years ago, and I think some people don't want to know how the dying
Yeah.
process happens,
Yeah.
but some people do. And so this is a book in case somebody wants to know how it goes down.
What a great resource for so many. I know I was even scrolling through Facebook this morning, and one of my friend's mom is on hospice, and she was saying, she's journaling and she's really self-reflecting on her time with her mom, but she's also saying, here, I know these are the final moments, and I am trying to make her as comfortable as she can be, and working with
Mm,
the hospice team and such, and just having not only a resource like your book, but also having that outlet where you can collaborate, or not collaborate, but have that conversation with others. And when people are more aware of it, and it's not this hidden thing where one day we don't wake up, then
mhm.
it's a conversation that feels more conversational, I guess, something
Yeah.
that's more okay to have. So I think that's a beautiful reflection of that person that may have had some fears, and you were able to, through that process that they were exposed to with their the patient next to them, they're able to go, okay, this is how it's going to go, and
Mhm.
they've finally maybe felt comfortable at their end of life. What are some misconceptions about hospice or at the end of life that your research and career have provided insights on?
Well, a lot of people don't want to sign on to hospice because, they think that, we just medicate people until they die. And sometimes they think that hospice causes death because we start morphine right away. And hospice philosophy and reality is that we don't hasten death. Like, that is not our thing at all. Um, we manage symptoms, and we start low and we go slow with medications. So if somebody is so say someone's having pain, I mean, a big part of it is patient autonomy, like I was saying. So some patients want to be on pain medications and some patients don't. And so we have ongoing conversations with them about what's important to them. Um, and so misconceptions are that it causes their death and it may quickly lead to their death. But I don't think that the research proves this. It used to prove this, but I don't think it does right now. But I really think having emotional, spiritual, physical support probably helps to lengthen their life, because I mean, I see it all the time. When people have more care, they just do better. More eyes on them, more people to help. You just kind of like relax more into this process. Um, let's see, other misconceptions about hospice is that morphine leads to death, and morphine doesn't lead to death. Again, we start low and we go slow if patients need pain medications, and we don't start it with everybody. But it's a really effective, cheap, useful tool to titrate pain. And when somebody's already had pain, we anticipate that their pain will increase throughout their stay on hospice.
Mhm.
And so I don't know how deeply to go into that, but some people are afraid of addiction also with pain medications. And of course, the opioid crisis, there's plenty of cause for concern. But when pain medications are used appropriately and they're titrated appropriately, and you use it because you have pain, then you don't have an addiction problem. You're using it because you need it.
Now, how can the caregiver best utilize the hospice team? How can they provide information about the patient to the hospice team in the best, most effective way?
I like talking about the team because I feel like it's underutilized a lot of times. And a lot of people go, someone will sign on to hospice, the hospice nurse will admit them, and then they'll say, okay, the chaplain will call you in the next 5 days, and the social worker will call you in the next 5 days. And a lot of people don't really know what that means. They
Mm.
think
Yeah.
chaplain is spiritual care only, like religious. And but it's very wide open. Chaplains are non-denominational. They offer spiritual support, and end of life is the question is posed, right? What's next?
Yeah.
What's the big thing that's next? And a lot of people are kind of working through this. So no matter if you're agnostic, atheist, Catholic, Jewish, like it's often a question that people have. It's like an existential thing. And I think that chaplains do a really beautiful job of holding space for somebody who's experiencing these spiritual questions. But it can also be like relational questions, like, I haven't seen my brother in 10 years. What do I do? Just like, should I invite him in? Should I call him? What should I do? Um, there's a lot of emotional processing. So the chaplain's amazing. The social workers are amazing. They provide resources on top of resources. So a lot of times the care can't be managed at home anymore. And so social workers can help to find a place that might be financially and medically realistic, or at least offer resources to somebody to find a place for their family member. Um, and they also do a lot of just counseling and presence. And, most of them are have their LCSW, they're licensed clinical social workers. So they have like depth and breadth of counseling skills and tools. The home health aide, they come in and they can help with showers and linen changes, and they can help educate the families about how to properly move somebody in bed or how to safely transfer them from the bed to the wheelchair. They can do light housekeeping. I mean, the home health aide, I want people always to say yes to a home health aide because it alleviates a lot of the physical burden for family members. So at least dad's going to get a shower twice a week, and it's from the aide, it's someone else that's not family. There's a lot of dignity and privacy that needs to be maintained. And I think having somebody else to be able to offer that can be helpful. And it's exhausting, honestly. Like whenever I bathe somebody or help with a shower, I'm like, I'm messy and wet and it's not pretty ever. So home health aides just do that so gracefully. We have volunteers that are amazing, and they're all clinically trained. I mean, on some level, it's usually like a 10 or 20-hour training to support somebody at the end of their life. And they can come to the house 4 hours a week. And just that way the caregiver can have a break for a little bit, which is kind of amazing. Um, and we have bereavement, which is a 1 year after somebody dies. It's counseling support. So it could be individual counseling or grief support groups. Yeah, I think hospice does a really good job of having this team. We also have a medical director, of course. There's a physician involved in the care all the time. Making the nurses aren't the ones who are making the decisions about what medications to change. The doctors in the end are the one, thank the Lord. So it's a really beautiful collaborative team approach, and I love it because end of life, I think all healthcare issues should be emotional, spiritual, nursing, physical care. I mean, it
Yeah.
should be holistic, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel really lucky to be working in end of life care where this is our model. It is supporting people in all ways at the end of their life. So
Yeah, thank you for highlighting everyone that is a part of that team, because it really is that team that makes the patient comfortable and the caregiver feel like they have the knowledge of what's going on. And it really is that team approach that is unique to the hospice experience per se. That
mhm,
really goes to show that the whole team is making the patient feel as comfortable as they can be at their end of life.
mhm, mhm.
Now, one thing that I love, you've got the great book, but you also have your website with great resources and blog posts that are really conversational and ask sort of questions that I know my family members have asked before. So, where can people go to learn more about your book and other resources?
It's my website. It's called bethcavenaugh.com. And it has just my stuff about my book and my blog posts. And my blog posts are about end of life care. So yeah, I just want to have information out there so it's accessible for people when they need it.
Beth, thank you for having this conversation with us today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was really nice to talk to you today.